Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Are you going to grow this next year? I hope so, but don't be so sure. Growth is not guaranteed. Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller, and I've got a story about that from one of my mentors. He encountered a leader who was very proud, and maybe not in the best sense of the word, but they wanted my mentor to be sure to realize and acknowledge their 25 years of experience. And he said, "Really? You have 25 years of experience? Or do you have 1 year of experience repeated 25 times?" And when I heard that, it's like, whoa, how much rinse and repeat can we fall into and assume that we're going to grow? We're going to get older, but we may not get wiser. We may not get smarter. We may not have new skills in a year. In fact, none of those things will be true unless we are intentional.
It starts with being intentional. It's crazy when you think about it. So I got my wife. We're struggling with our plants right now. I mean, it's like, and it's not the time of year to be growing plants, but we have some. And I just saw her. She's watering a plant. It's like these things come to our house to die. It's like we are not. I say we. It's on her. I'm blaming her. Maybe she won't listen, but she is not the green thumb that my mom is still, and her mom was. I mean, it's like when we go to their houses, like these flowers are growing everywhere. It's crazy. And when I come home, I'm like, what is the deal? Well, here's the deal. My mother-in-law and my mom were both exactly what you're talking about. They're intentional. They spend time with their flowers. And it's crazy what happens when we spend time on something. It begins to grow. And when we don't, it actually it doesn't grow. It's not good. So if you're listening today, you're here with us. Welcome again to the show. We're gonna talk about some of this stuff to try to help you grow your life. I mean, it really is, this idea of growing is powerful. And yesterday we talked about time being a part of it, but there's so much more.
Yeah, I think we're back on that same theme.
Yeah,
it's like it's intentionality, but it's intentional about the time you invest. It's intentional about the people you spend time with. It's intentionality about the activities that you engage in. I think the men and women I know that are my heroes in this space are those that are very, very intentional and strategic with their plans for growth.
Yeah, it's cool when you think about this. There's different layers. Let's use the gardening kind of mindset here. So there's this planting season, or probably the gardeners are probably telling me, no, there's a prep season that's what we're doing here. We're actually prepping for our plan, but there's going to be a planting season. You're going to lay some foundation as you go in. And then all kind of other stuff starts happening. It's not just like you go and you bring it home and you water it occasionally. I mean, there is watering, but there's weeding that goes in. There's pruning that goes in. And so as you start thinking about your leadership, what are those things that you need to do right now? You do probably need to do some planning. And again, we're talking about that, lay a foundation. But I'm guessing there's some places where you need to do a little weeding from the last year. We're going to actually jump into that here next day or so.
Sure.
But some pruning, I think the idea of being able to say no, and you talked about yesterday, eliminating some things off your calendar, that can be a powerful way that we probably need to intentionally do that, or it'll just keep showing up over and over and overgrowing the garden, right?
Yeah, and this may be a little bit premature because in a couple of episodes, we're going to talk about the plan, but in the spirit of this conversation, I think you've got to hold the plan loosely. Stuff happens. You may end up changing the plan. In fact, I think in many cases, you'll change your plan, or you'll prune, or you'll add, or you'll modify, or you'll learn something, or you'll have an insight. It's like, well, that's not in my plan. We'll change it. It's a tool, right? The plan is a tool to facilitate your growth. And, we've talked about this many, many times. To facilitate is really about removing barriers and removing obstacles. And that's all the plan is supposed to do, is to facilitate your growth.
Right. The plan is about the growth. It's not about the plan.
It's not about the plan.
It's really about the growth.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to foster this thing. As you think about your own leadership, like what are some of the areas through the years that that you've seen the weeds grow and you have to keep cutting back or pruning. There's a book we both have loved, Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings. He talks about a rose bush.
It's a great book.
It's a great book, one of the best I've read. And he talks about, his premise is if you take a rose bush, it's got more buds than it has nutrients to be able to supply all the buds. The wise gardener knows what to prune and cut back, and then the thing will explode because it's wanting to happen, but you got to cut it back. And you shared something just recently with me that we got from I first heard John Maxwell talk about this idea of giving up to go up. And so as you think about weeding and pruning and giving up and rethinking your life even as we get older, and we're still trying to work on this, like what are you thinking on that?
Well, let me add just a bit to Henry's metaphor. He said, if you've ever seen a rose bush that's never been pruned, it's ugly.
It is.
And by extension, a life that has no pruning is not a pretty thing.
Yeah.
It's not, because you can create more buds than you can sustain in your life, the same as that rose bush.
You just say yes to everything.
So you have to say no.
You're a mess.
And so I have been trying to figure that out my whole life. Again, trying to say, what can I prune so that I can keep the priorities. And, your team has been a tremendous asset to me over the years. The resources that you guys have helped me create. In the early days, I did all of that myself. Now, I would still love to do that, but I felt like I needed to give some of that up. And again, your team has partnered with me now for almost a decade. I mean, we've done 8 or 10 field guides together, and that was an opportunity where I gave up some of that to a trusted partner, and it's allowed us to do more because I was willing to prune some of those activities.
Yeah. What would you say to that leader, Mark, who might be listening, who's got areas in their life that it has been rinse and repeat for a long time, and it's just, it's almost like have you ever been around a place where people have clutter or they're a pack rat, they just save everything. At some point, it just becomes burdensome to have all this, not your stuff, but your emotional, your leadership stuff, all that stuff. If we don't spend some time thinking about that and pruning that, what do you say to that person who is just they're just hanging on and they can't let go of that? I mean, you got any thoughts there to help them?
I'm not a psychologist, so I want to be real careful. Remember, I've spent 100 years selling chicken.
Yeah.
But I would go back and look at, this is something else from John. What is required of you? And then what gives you the greatest return? And can you start there? And all of a sudden, if you clear the decks and start with what's required and what gives me the biggest return, you may find there's a lot of other stuff that you're going, well, why is this here? So I think my short answer, without getting into the psychology of that, is start with an audit and figure out what are you doing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's powerful is we've got to be able to let go of some things if we're going to plant some new things. So I have a guy on my team, Scott. Scott, he calls me a few months back and says, we're going to plant a pumpkin patch. And I'm like, a pumpkin patch? You don't know anything about pumpkin patch. He said, I Googled it and I watched some YouTube videos that you can learn anything now. And we're going to do this patch. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And he said, we're going to grow a bunch of pumpkins and we're going to sell them and give the money they're trying to help some people in their community. And I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And so it was wild. I just watched him over the last few months. I say watched him like I was there helping out. He's up in Kentucky, but he's sending me pictures along the way. And the first one looked pretty good. Looks like he's got them all planted and everything. I mean, there's nothing growing. And then just recently I got a picture and he had 700 pumpkins on a trailer. It was just like incredible that happened. And I'm looking back at that and I'm thinking, how cool is it that this guy had this idea to do this? I started asking him about it. I said, where'd you get the idea? And he said, it's crazy. We had a fire pit the year before and I threw a pumpkin into it at the end of the night one night and didn't think anything about it. And 2 or 3 weeks later, I had a pumpkin vine that was growing out of that. And he said, I started thinking, if we can grow a vine out of the ashes of this pit, we probably could grow more if we got real intentional about it. I think there are people who are listening today who maybe they're even in a bad place. It's just like things aren't going so
ashes.
well. It's the ashes right now, it feels like. But what would happen if every single leader just began to think intentionally about their growth and get strategic And yes, there'll be some planning that'll have some prep actually that'll have to happen, and some planning, and there'll be watering, and they were out there in the summer sweating and pulling the weeds and protecting this important this harvest that's coming. But I love the idea that we really do reap. It's the old, we reap what we sow, and we reap later than we sow, but we reap more than we sow. I mean, his pumpkins were just incredible when I looked at that. If you're listening today and maybe things are not good, I would encourage you to get real intentional and real focused. If you're listening today and things are good, I would encourage you to double down on being intentional and focused about your growth. Remember, your growth is not guaranteed. I hope you'll really do what you need to do to make sure that you're putting in the work. If you'll put time on it, you can have a green thumb leadership environment. It'd be so amazing if you create that kind of culture. Or you can be like us with our plants, and you don't put a lot of time on it, and the next thing you know, everything's kind of wilting and doesn't look so good. Your leadership can flourish in the next year if you'll get focused on your growth. I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll come back tomorrow, share with somebody, continue to spread the word of Lead Every Day. We appreciate so much you being here. Remember, the best leaders really do lead every day.